Is that video not amazing? I have to try not to cry here. Okay. Good evening. For those of you who I've not yet met, my name is Melissa Giller. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Reagan Foundation and Institute. Thank you for being with us this evening. If you have attended an event here before, you know that we start each program by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. We do it in honor of the men and women who defend our freedom around the world. Tonight, I ask that as we recite the pledge, we do so in honor of those who are currently fighting, those who are missing, those who have perished, and those who are veterans. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started, there are a few people in the audience I'd like to recognize tonight. I understand there's a large group here from Gary and Mary's families, including his mother, Anne, his brother, Stephen, and his daughter, Alyssa, who we just saw in the video. Can we please ask everyone in his family to stand so we can thank you all for being here tonight? Also here with us this evening, our Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend, who's one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen. Good to have you with us this evening. Greg Alemo, who helped us secure tonight's speaker, thank you so much. We appreciate having you here. And a very, very special thank you to Lori Baker, who's sitting right here. She's the executive director of the Infinite Hero Foundation, which is the organization that donated the exoskeleton to Gary. So there are many honorable and prestigious things we get to do here as employees of the Reagan Foundation, such as working and organizing presidential debates, hosting events for sitting congressmen, cabinet members. Heck, last night we had President George W. Bush here. But for me, getting to know and meeting our country's heroes far outweighs anything else I have the privilege to do. And getting to know tonight's speaker has been a highlight of my career. This event first came to happen because we were looking for speakers that could potentially tie into our special exhibit, Interactive. For those of you who have not yet seen the exhibition, Interactive is a large-scale, highly immersive exhibit which showcases how science fiction can become reality. The exhibit shows how modern-day technology has been influenced by popular culture from the 50s through the 80s, Star Wars, Star Trek, Terminator, Back to the Future, changing the ways in which we live, work, move, connect, and play. It's open through April 17th. So, how can we find a speaker that epitomizes our exhibit's theme? And then Greg called, and he recommended we bring tonight's speaker to the library, and we thought, hey, here's a guy literally wearing a wearable robot. What better speaker could we find? In fact, in doing research for tonight's program, I found this quote from a 2013 article from the co-founder of Ekso Bionics, who makes the exoskeleton. It was science fiction technology. We're helping people walk again who otherwise couldn't. And so we brought science fiction to reality in a very short period of time. Which leads to tonight's guest, Chief Foreign Officer 5, Gary Linfoot, U.S. Army retired. Gary has over 23 years of military service, including serving as a member of the Army's elite 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. As we saw in the video just a few minutes ago, in June of 2008, while conducting operations in Iraq, Gary's helicopter suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, crash-landed. As a result of the hard landing, Gary suffered a broken back and was instantly paralyzed below the waist. He retired from the Army in 2010, but continues to serve the Night Stalker community as an AMH-6 simulator flight instructor. Flash forward to 2013, when Gary became the first military recipient of an exoskeleton for home use through a grant from the Infinite Hero Foundation. By Memorial Day of 2014, he had completed over 100,000 steps using the device. Who knows how many he's done since then. And as we just saw in the video, and I'm not sure about you, but I was in that back room crying, just a few short months ago, Gary walked Alyssa down the aisle. As President Reagan once said, our veterans are the heroes among us. Let us pay them tribute, and let us resolve to live up to their example. I can think of no better person whose example I would like to live up to. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Linfoot with his wife, Mary.
Whew, made it. Thank you. Oh, my legs are shaking. Nervous. Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you at the Ronald Reagan Library and have the opportunity to speak with you. I'd like to recognize Colonel Friend, who just celebrated his 97th birthday this past week. Hope I look that good when I'm your age. And I'd also like to recognize Lori Baker for producing. You okay? that film you saw. She did a fabulous job on it, and I think it really captures the essence of what Infinite Hero is doing. So tonight I'm going to tell you a story. My hope is that you hear a story of a family that has overcome difficulty and met challenges head on, never backing down, never giving up. It's a story of hope. This is our story. May 31st, 2008 is a date my life and the lives of my family and friends were changed forever. On that date, I'd been in the Army for 21 years. I'd been a pilot for over 19 years and an AH-6 Little Bird pilot in the 160th SOAR for 11 years. I'd completed one combat rotation to Afghanistan immediately following 9/11 and was on my 20th combat rotation to Iraq. All total was 861 days. I was the senior flight lead in MB Company, 1st Battalion, 160th SOAR, and we were known as the Six Guns. Our mission was to provide close air support for the best special operations forces the world had ever known. I was at the apex of my career, and there was no other job in the world I wanted. I was in my element and exactly where I needed to be. If you recall, as a nation, we had been at war for almost 7 years at that point. We'd been in Iraq for 5 years. 2008 was the end of a very successful surge, and we had broken the back of the enemy, and we had them on the run. For my family, the constant deployments of 30 to 90 days to Iraq 4 or 5 times a year had become somewhat routine. I'd tell my wife and kids goodbye and then drive to our compound, board a C-5 or C-17, and I'd be gone for the lives for the next 90 days. Missing holidays, birthdays, special occasions, school sports, life went on at home without me. Now, while deployed, all I could think about was being home again. When I was home, all I could think about was getting back to Iraq. I guess in all those years, I never really quite made it back home. But that was our life in 2008. That was the routine. I'm going to loosen this up a little bit because I can hardly breathe. I call this my girdle. Instant thinning device, gets my gut sucked in. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. But that was a routine for us. However, this night would prove anything but routine. On 31st May 2008, summer was already upon Iraq. I woke that day, completed some PT like I always did, showered, grabbed a cup of coffee, and walked over to our hangar to pre-flight my AH-6. I was updated by the crew chiefs on the status of all our aircraft, and I walked over to our Joint Operations Center to report the daily status of our aircraft and received a warning order for a mission that night. It was shaping up to be a routine night in support of our British counterparts who were a member of our Joint Task Force. Around 10 o'clock, we departed Balad Air Base as a flight of 2 AH-6s and headed for our mission support site in Baghdad. Once at the MSS, we attended an operations brief. Now, the Brits, they are always fun to work with, and although we shared a common language, they were often very difficult to understand, and at times required someone to translate over to American for us. The brief for this night had a very heavy accent, and at the end of the briefing, I turned over to my guys and I said, "Hey, did anybody understand a word he just said?" Everybody shook their head. No, we did not. But we were able to get a good translation and clarification from their fire support NCO, and we're good to go. Now, our mission that night was simple and one that we had literally performed hundreds of times. The Brits would fly in their Pumas to an American forward operating base 30 minutes south of Baghdad. There, the ground force would link up with 4 American Bradley fighting vehicles and up-armored Humvees, and they would ride to the objective. They'd leave the vehicles at what was called the vehicle drop-off, or VDO, and then quietly and hopefully undetected, walk up to the objective where they would surround the target building. Once surrounding the target building, they'd call out the person of interest, the target that night, the person they want to detain, and for us it was really low-hanging fruit at that point. Now, if things got loud, meaning they had to assault the building, we would be called in to provide close air support. Now, as required, we departed the MSS to proceed to our planned holding area. Now, when we took off, I eased in the power of the what we called the heavily laden egg-shaped chariot of death. Tail number 649. I was loaded with 14 HE rockets, 3,000 rounds of minigun, and 800 pounds of fuel. Even at its maximum gross rate of 4,700 pounds, the 650 shaft horsepower engine easily grew out to life, with the rotor blades churning the hot night air into submission, and we lifted off into the sky. Climbing to 300 feet, I called out our departure Baghdad Tower using the call sign Havoc, and the dogs of war slipped off into the night. Now, sometime after takeoff, we could hear a strange noise coming from the rear of our aircraft. It was a loud blowing noise of sorts. Unknown to us, this was the first and only indication of an impending failure of the engine to transmission drive shaft. My co-pilot and I, we discussed this sound, and unable to determine its source, with all cockpit instrumentation reading normal, no unusual vibrations, we convinced ourselves that the bleed air heater had opened somehow, or maybe an engine panel had opened, what was causing the noise. So we continued our mission. Eventually, the noise pretty much all but ceased. June 1st, midnight, zero illumination. Visibility was 3 miles with blowing dust. Winds were out of the north, approximately 20-25 knots. We had just arrived at our planned holding area at an altitude of 300 feet AGL. We were at a speed of 70 knots indicated, and we were heading 180. Suddenly there was a muffled but loud explosion, or a sort of pop, coming from the rear of the aircraft. What that was a K-flex coupling connecting the drive shaft to the engine, disintegrated, and we lost all power to our main rotor. Immediately we violently yawed to the left, the rotor RPM decayed, and we fell from the sky. I entered what's called an auto-rotational descent and put the aircraft in a hard left turn in an attempt to get us into a headwind. I scanned the instruments, adjusted the collective control to maintain rotor RPM in the green, while simultaneously making a mayday call on the radio and picking out a suitable landing area. We were too heavy and we were falling fast. This was going to be a hard landing. Now, my last memory of the landing was seeing the green blur of the ground rushing up through us through the night vision goggles. I also remember hearing the audio warning of low rotor and seeing our rotor RPM on our vids rapidly decaying to the red. I told my co-pilot, Greg, brace for impact, and we hit. Total time from the onset of the emergency to impact was less than 10 seconds. Now, the impact itself was very surreal. If you've ever been in a violent, high-speed automobile crash, you can pretty much relate to what it felt like. After the sound of the aircraft crushing, the rotor blades smacking the ground, and the tail section separating from the helicopter, and all the lungs leaving our bodies, there was an eerie silence and stillness. Upon impact, my vertebrae at L1 and T12 burst, sending fragments of bone into the spinal cord. Paralysis was instant, and I felt my legs fall to the left. I completed an emergency shutdown of the aircraft, and smelling the strong odor of jet fuel, and fearing we may be on fire, I yelled to Greg that we needed to get out. With my right hand, I grabbed the door frame through the shattered plexiglass in an attempt to step out of the cockpit. And it was at that time I realized I could not move my legs. Then the pain kicked in. Now, Greg had suffered a broken back and a concussion. To this day, he has no memory of the crash or the events leading up to the accident. Greg was able to egress the cockpit, and he was now lying in pain in the front of the aircraft up against a canal berm. We had missed landing in the water in the canal by only feet. I grabbed my M4 rifle and wanted to both signal our sister ship that we were alive and warn any approaching personnel to stay away. I fired several shots. Now, Greg, he heard those shots, and he was knocked somewhat loopy. He thought we were being shot at, and he yelled back at me, "Gary, they're shooting at us." I told him it was only a me. And I stopped shooting. I tried to contact our trail ship, who was up overhead on the embedded radio, with no success. There was nothing but darkness, smell of JP-8, and pain. At this time, I checked my legs, hoping to find out that they had just been broken and that I was in some sort of shock. Both legs were intact, and at this point, I knew I had suffered a spinal cord injury. Many thoughts and images raced through my mind, and they all told me the same thing. This was going to suck. After about 10 minutes, my friend Steve Red, the co-pilot of our trail aircraft, suddenly appeared at my door. He asked if we had been shot down, and I told him no, I believed it was a mechanical failure. Steve quickly triaged myself and Greg, and he began to coordinate the CASEVAC aircraft to come get us. A short time, 2 of our Blackhawks from the 160th landed with about 20 Rangers, and they secured the crash site. Greg was soon evacuated on our MH-60s, and I would wait for the Air Force CSAR pararescue team to come and cut me out of the aircraft. Less than an hour after the crash, which is really remarkable if you consider everything, less than an hour I was on my way to the first of several hospitals en route to the United States. It was back at the cache at Ballard that a nurse handed me the phone and said, "Go ahead, call your wife." So I called Mary, and
Told him that was me.
that was her. Chief of Staff. So Mary had just walked in the front door after a long day at the ball field with our daughter when the phone rang, and she was somewhat surprised to hear my voice. I asked her if anybody from the unit had contacted her. She said no, and immediately thought that something bad had happened and someone had been killed. My voice was calm and clear, and I told her that I'd been in a bad crash and had broken my back. Mary was saddened that I would live a life of back pain, but relieved that I was okay. Then I told her I couldn't move my legs. She immediately went into crisis mode and had the frame of mind to have me talk to the kids so they knew their dad was okay. It'd be a sleepless night for her and the kids.
Good.
I'm sorry.
That's good.
Our son, he simply asks if this meant if his dad ever had to go back to Iraq again. So in less than 24 hours, surgery was completed to fixate my spine, and I was on my way to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, the first of 3 hospitals where we'd spend the next 3 months in recovery and rehab. Now, with Mary by my side the entire way, we began our unwanted journey together. Now, spinal cord injury and paralysis is a very unique and complex injury. No 2 injuries are ever exactly the same. There were effects of the injuries I had never thought of, but would soon discover. Beyond the loss of movement to my legs, there was a loss of bladder and bowel control, loss of sexual function, a loss of dignity. Depression is very common, and then there's the pain that never goes away. It is a very cruel injury. So in those 3 months, we moved from Walter Reed to Tampa, Florida, to the VA, and then to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta. All the while, we're discovering more about this injury and learning the skills that we'd need to survive this new normal of being a paraplegic. I was focused on recovery and getting home, while Mary was focused on what we needed once we're at home, to include home and vehicle modifications, special equipment, continued therapy, and the list just seemed to go on and on. Together, we made a pretty good team. Now, the next year was really all about learning the reality of being a paraplegic. Many hours were spent on the phone coordinating with doctors and the VA to get things done. We had to learn how to patiently navigate our way through an immense bureaucracy. In January of 2010, I was medically retired from the Army with 23 years of service. It was that summer I began to work as a simulator flight instructor, teaching our new aviators to the 160th. Now, sometime that summer, if I remember correctly, as time at this point of that time in my life is pretty much a blur of change, and I believe I fell into a depression. I fell into a depression, and I definitely know that I took out a lot of my anger and frustration out on Mary. I was angry. And I was ashamed of what I'd become. I lost my self-worth as a soldier, as a man, as a husband, and as a father. I'd gone from being an elite special operations attack helicopter pilot, the alpha male and leader of remarkable warriors fighting evil, to someone who could do very little for himself. In my mind, I was a failure. Now, on the outside, I think I did a good job of covering it up. I tried to keep a smile on my face and a good attitude. I went to work, I joked around, I tried to exercise. I tried to cover the pain and do my best not to complain. But on the inside, I died a little more each day. This injury was beating me down, and it was a death of 1,000 cuts. I prayed to God that He would take this all from me, and I prayed that it would just end. I wanted it all to be over. Now I've been to the edge, I've stared into that dark abyss. This is what I know. We are all here for a short amount of time, but we are here with and for a purpose. I truly believe that God has a plan for all of us. If it weren't true, we wouldn't be here now. I survived that crash, not because of my superior flying skills, although if you ask me, I'm going to tell you how good I am. How good looking, too. Yeah, right? No. I believe I survived that night because God still has a purpose for me. He's not done with me yet. It's for this reason that I chose, and my family chooses, to continue to fight together, and we've never given up. And when I prayed to God and told Him I couldn't do this, it was as if I heard Him say, "That's right, you can't do this alone. That's why I've given you your wife, your children, your family, your friends, and you have me." You see, I believe the saying, "God does not give you more than you can handle," is incorrect. He will give you more than you can handle, but it is with Him and through His strength that you will overcome and you will thrive. Mary and I have made a conscious choice to move on and live out our lives to the best. We owe it not only to ourselves, but to our family and our friends, and we owe it to those we have lost. I've been given a second chance, that many of my friends and fellow warriors did not get. I owe it to those who did not come home to live a life well lived. There have been many difficulties on this path, and I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a tough road. But in the end, I believe it's all going to be worth it. We benefit from the kindness and generosity of many people, and I've been the recipient of high-tech robotic equipment to include the iBot, which is an electric wheelchair that climbs stairs and balances on 2 wheels while lifting me to a sitting height of 6 feet, and the Ekso Bionics exoskeleton, purchased by the Infinite Hero Foundation, in which I stand before you tonight. With this equipment, we've traveled the country, seeing and doing things I never would have thought possible, talking to young kids about advanced robotics, and hopefully planting that small seed in the mind of a child that will one day blossom into an idea that may change the world and may even one day help end paralysis. We successfully completed an FDA trial of the exoskeleton, and it is now available through veterans to the VA. We've demonstrated that, which was not long ago thought to be impossible. A paraplegic has fundamentally been able to stand and walk again. I was honored to be the first paraplegic to walk around the Statue of Liberty using the exoskeleton. And it was in April 2015 that for the first time since the accident, I was able to stand with Mary by my side for the National Anthem in front of thousands of people at an NHRA race in Bristol, Tennessee. Now believe me, I will never take for granted the little things in life. Little things like being able to get out of bed in the morning, use the bathroom in less than 2 minutes. Or the ability to climb 3 steps to go knock on a neighbor's door, or to stand and hug my wife and kids. These things have been lost to me, but some of them I'm getting back. As you saw in the video this past October, I was able to walk my beautiful daughter, Alyssa, down the aisle on her wedding day. Here's where I can't make contact with her because I'll get all choked up. So I'm just going to stare right here. If one were to ask me for advice on getting through life following a traumatic event, I would offer the following. Trust in the Lord, give thanks, and remember that each day is a gift. Get up every morning and find your purpose. Rewrite your story if needed, and discover what your why is. Why am I here? What is my purpose? It may not be what you thought it was going to be, but you have a purpose. Discover what it is and pursue it with everything you have. Surround yourself with people you love, people who support you, and who will challenge you. Use words of encouragement for each other. You never know what those simple words of encouragement will do for somebody. You may change a life. Bad things happen to good people. Throughout life, at some point, we will all face tragedies and hardships. Respectfully, I say, get over it. Ultimately, you are responsible for your own happiness, and you got to move on. No one ever said life was going to be easy. Accept the challenge of life and play the cards you've been dealt to the best of your ability. In the end, it will all have been worth it. And lastly, never, ever quit. Thank you.
Because you're going to fall off the chair to the left, so you want to move to the right.
Yeah, I can.
That's better.
People tricks. You got the clamps?
No. No. You want me to
So
do
we
one?
can't thank you enough for sharing that remarkable story with us. I think if we could just give him one more round of applause, please.
Thank you.
So I know you have questions. I'll try not to ask too many and take up too much time, but I think we saw...
Alyssa.
Yeah, can we get a tissue up here? Thank you.
Baby, baby.
Standing up, that thing squeezes the snot out of me.
So I think watching you walk in and then just watching you sit down here, I think, I know I speak for myself, but a lot of people, can you explain how the exoskeleton actually works?
So the exoskeleton, as you see it, it basically replaces the bone and muscles of my body. Fits around the outside of my body, and mechanically and electrically it will stand me up. And then I'll take control of it, I'll activate it and tell it I'm going to start moving. And the way I walk with it is much like you would walk if you were going to step off with your left foot. You would put your weight over your right foot, and then you would shift your CG forward. I do the same thing, and when the device detects that I'm within safe parameters, it will go ahead and activate the step, and then I'll just continue to repeat that process. And as long as I'm shifting my weight and shifting my CG, it will continue to walk.
Was it hard to learn how to use?
It's very intuitive. It's strange because I can't feel anything really below my navel, and so it's kind of like balancing a broom on the tip of your finger is what it feels like in a way. So once I was able to trust the machine that it was going to stand me up and not let me drop to the ground, it was just a matter of learning where those safe points were, where the shift points were, and so it took about 3 days to learn it, and then after using the device for, I'd say after a couple weeks to a month, it was easy.
And how much, so Mary's helping you today, and I know I've seen videos, and your son's helping you and other people. How much are they actually doing in the movement?
Now, once she stands me up, she has to activate the standing feature. So once she stands me up, she turns control over to me, and then she is there purely for safety purposes. Because if I were to fall back, and I can get the crutches back to catch myself, that's how I do it. However, if I'm in a situation where I'm unable to get the crutches back, she's back there to push me back into play.
Do you know how you came to be the first person to receive an exoskeleton?
It kind of a long story. I'll try to give us the Cliff Note versions of it. But I've been involved with an organization called the Air Power Foundation, and they are involved annually in an event that is hosted by American Airlines, and it's called Skyball down in Dallas-Fort Worth. Like I said, been involved with them for several years, and every year at Skyball, they have a different theme. In the past, it's been welcoming home our World War II veterans, or Vietnam veterans, or Gulf War veterans. This particular year, they were highlighting how robotics and technology were helping and influencing the lives of our returning veterans. And one of the folks that was on the board that year, his company had just made a major investment into Ekso Bionics, and he knew about this exoskeleton. He said it'd be great if we could bring one of these devices out and demonstrate it at Skyball. And Jim Palmersheim, the director, he said, yeah, that's an excellent idea, but we're not going to use one of your guys. I know just the guy we're going to use. So he gave me a call, asked if I would be interested in getting in the exoskeleton. I said, absolutely. So we flew out to California, got trained up over 3 days, and about a month and a half later, walked out on stage with the Ekso.
That's remarkable. Are there limitations on how long you can use it, or are there things you wish it could do that it doesn't do yet?
Sure, the major limiting factor to it right now is battery power. And that's always going to be an issue with devices like this. So depending on how much I'm walking, I'd probably get about an hour to an hour and a half out of one set of batteries, and then we can switch out the batteries. So in total, we can get about 4 hours, I guess, from battery life with the two sets. This device is limited to a flat, level surface without much of a rise. It can handle about 3 degrees of rise. Unable to go up and down stairs at this point. So those are its major limiting factors right now.
So
I wish I could run, climb trees.
In time, right?
In time, one of
time.
these days, yeah.
It'll keep getting smaller and
Yep.
smaller.
Yep.
Now, I do know the answer to this, but I have to ask the question. Some people name their boats, some people name their cars. Have you named your exoskeleton?
We have.
Meet Newman.
This is Newman. Yeah. And Newman is, Lori, if you remember Newman from Seinfeld, Newman. You got his name.
So you were here last night with our program with President
Yes.
Bush, and just prior to the program, you had mentioned to me that you met him before. Can you
did.
explain how that happened?
So shortly after returning from our first combat operations in Afghanistan, we came home in, this was in April or May of 2002. JSOC had put on what's called a capabilities exercise for President of the United States. And this was really President Bush's first exposure and detailed briefing and demonstration of what the capabilities of JSOC were. So it was during some of our static displays at that point where he was walking around meeting everybody. I had the opportunity to meet him and shake hands with him.
That's really great. And then we met him again last night,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
really
sure
great.
did.
We know you did 19 overseas tours. Can you tell us what kept you going through all of those tours?
This is going to sound corny, but it's just a sense of duty. It's a sense of purpose. What we are fighting, this evil that is out there, is something we got to destroy, and we're not going to do it sitting at home. And so I felt it was my job to go downrange and take the fight to the enemy. And if nothing else, I was going to help keep it over there, not allow it to come home to the United States.
Being able to be a flight instructor on the simulators, are you able to keep that sense of purpose going?
Somewhat. It's not as exciting. I'm not scaring myself every night, chasing rockets to the ground, but I am. I feel like I still have my finger in the mix, and I'm able to some way influence and help our new aviators to the 160th learn about the aircraft. And a lot of it is not only we teach in systems in the simulator, but a lot of it is just relating our combat experience to folks so they don't have to, I'll tell we embellish a lot of stories. We tell war stories while we're down there on the console. But there is a purpose to that because many of the lessons learned in previous combat operations have been lost to us over the years. So if we have people that can keep reminding us, telling us, teaching us these lessons that we've learned, they won't be forgotten and they'll continue on.
So Mary, we did put a mic on you, so I have to ask you a question. Can you share a few words about your journey through all of this?
I think, when we first knew that he was going to go to war, I thought Gary would either come home or he wouldn't. The whole thing about him coming home severely wounded didn't really enter my mind. Gary was a pilot. To be very honest, my other friends, their husbands either came home or they didn't. People rarely survive a helicopter crash. And so this whole thing of him being severely injured was not on the radar at all. And I am very, very, consider myself one of the lucky ones, obviously. I'm very, very thankful that Gary did survive. I'm thankful that his mind is good. He's still the same person. His shoes last a lot longer. And he's shorter for sometimes. Anyway, so I'm very thankful that I still have him. And immediately after he was injured, I just, let's figure it out. It was my problem-solving mode was where I lived for a very long time. And actually, it still is. Last night, President Bush, made a joke that, well, I'll retell it somewhat, that they asked if he looked at things differently now that he's a painter, and he said, well, yeah, I look into Ellen DeGeneres' eyes, and I thought, I can mix that color. And so when I enter a room, I figure out how we're gonna navigate that room, how we're gonna get in, how we're gonna get out, how we're gonna get a rental car that's gonna actually work and fit all our equipment, how we're gonna get everything to the airport. So it's like constant problem solving, and honestly, I'm thankful for it, so.
Well, it's nice to have such a nice family help as well.
A funny story about shoes. One of the guys I work with, Greg, he had an old pair of shoes and he was fixing to get rid of them. He was getting a new pair. And the top of them, they still look pretty good. And I was like, those bottoms look well worn. I said, can I have those shoes? Just because it, would make me look a little more normal if my shoes were worn.
So I know I've asked you a ton. I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Gary yesterday and today, and I know I've asked you a zillion questions, and you must get stopped every day and ask the same questions over and over and over again. Does it ever get tiring?
No, because people are just naturally curious. They want to know, and I'll never fault someone for asking a question. Everybody's always been respectful, and where I was raised and where I came up in the Army, everybody had thick skin. So if you were insulted, you got over it in about 2 seconds and you moved on. So no, I welcome questions from people just because there's a lot about paralysis and injuries that are a mystery to people out there, and if people are aware of what it's like, what it's about, maybe challenges you face, I think that helps us all, make the world a better place for folks that are dealing with special circumstances.
Which I think is a great lead into taking audience questions. We do ask, we're gonna have you raise your hand. Please wait for someone to bring a microphone to you because this is being recorded and the only way the cameras can hear you is if a microphone is brought to you. There's one right there.
Gary, thank you for your service. Did you have the option of jettisoning those rocket pods?
Yes, we did. So it seems after any kind of aircraft accident, changes are made. One of the changes that was made to our aircraft was where the jettison panel for the rockets were. Where they were at the time of my accident were below the collective control, and it was very difficult to get to. My co-pilot, because we were in holding going into combat operations, he was hanging out the door with his M4 rifle, and of course I was on the controls. And when this all happened, it happened so quick, there just wasn't time in that 10 seconds or less to reach down and jettison those rockets. Now they've moved the jettison panel, it's actually up on the center console to where it's very easy to reach up and boom, hit those and jettison them.
Carla, there's one right here on the end. Right here.
My question is about the exoskeleton, and is this a first generation and that there will be new and improved ones to come? And how many people do you think are eligible now, and will the VA provide them with an exoskeleton?
So this particular exoskeleton is second generation of the Ekso Bionics version. They're constantly working to improve their devices. Matter of fact, on Monday we're going up to Berkeley, California. We're going to help them with some testing for the next model. So yes, they are continuing to improve. They want to make it lighter, more powerful, more functional. And because of the successful FDA trial, these devices are available to paraplegics through the Veterans Administration. They have to get tested out and meet all the criteria because there are 3 manufacturers, much like Ford, Chevy, and Dodge. Each one, they do the same thing, but each a little different. So there's competition, which is helping drive innovation. But if an individual meets the criteria to safely be fitted for and operate these devices, they are now eligible to have them at home through the VA.
Yes, sir, I salute you, and you need to turn the salute, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you very much for your service, both prior to your injury and since, and certainly big thanks to your lovely wife, Mary, because as you know, her job is certainly as special as yours was, the operations stuff. My question to you is this. After spending time in a wheelchair, and now you spend a fair amount of time in the erect position, standing, has your physiology changed?
A little bit. What I have found that is being up and moving around, it helps with the circulation, it helps with the swelling in the legs, it helps with bowel and bladder seems to be better when you're up and walking, because the human body is just not meant to sit for long periods of time. And you know, for me, I'm going on sitting for 9 years now, so I'm ready to get up and walk around. So there's physiology of the body that seems to be better. Bone density from the scans I've had has improved a little bit, has not got as bad as they would expect it to for someone, so it has, I guess, helped decrease the amount of bone density I lose over time. And then there's just the, you know, the ability to stand up and converse with someone, look them in the eye, you get that dignity back. And walking my daughter down the aisle, that was something that
Made me cry.
Oh.
I hate to admit it, but it
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, thank you. But you know, that was something that I was, you know, in a way, I was looking forward to the day that she would get married, because the character she married, really good guy. I like him. Yeah, no, good guy. But you know, I always dreaded getting her down the aisle because I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was just kind of, I didn't want to do it in a wheelchair. So when the exoskeleton came along, it was match made in heaven, dream come true, and I'm glad we were able to do it. It meant a lot to us.
Thank you.
Hi, Gary. I wanted to thank you for your service. I had a quick question that I thought of as soon as I saw this on the Reagan website. You did 19 tours, and that's a lot. How many tours do you think you would have done if you hadn't gotten in the accident?
I probably would have kept going until I hit 30 years service. I have friends that are, my total tours were, I have friends that kept deploying after I stopped deploying, and they were, you know, they numbered upwards around 30 or so. And keep in mind, our rotations over there were somewhat different. Weren't like conventional forces that were going over there for 12 to 15 months. Our tours were generally anywhere from about 30 to 90 days. So, you know, and we'd go over there 4 or 5 times a year, depending.
Thank you.
Hi, Gary. As a C4 level quadriplegic, I unfortunately can relate to a lot of what you've been discussing here today. My question to you is, as you pursued things constantly trying to get recovery, use technology to your advantage, et cetera, do you have any suggestions or knowledge that might help people that can't use their arms?
So that's difficult. It's hard for me to understand completely what someone who doesn't have use of their arms is going through. I do remember when I was in the Shepherd Center, one of the gentlemen I shared my room with, he had a high neck injury. I don't remember exactly what it was. He was actually able to stand, but he couldn't use his hands. And he was a craftsman. And, you know, so for him, he was just saying, if only I could have my hands back. So I understand it, but I really don't know completely. What I would say is, I participate in a program called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. So I see a lot of the research that is being proposed for all levels of spinal cord injury. And there are a lot of great ideas coming down the pipeline. So I would say to someone, just don't give up hope. Just make the best of what you have, and just always be hopeful that tomorrow we're going to learn something more about this injury and how to overcome it.
There's a lot of similarity, as much as there can be similarity, between you and Johnny Erickson Tada and what she's done through the wheelchair ministry just a few miles from here. And I was curious as to what interaction you might have had and what lessons you might have learned from her experience, which happened to her when she was only 19 years old. Johnny Erickson Tada.
You're not familiar.
I'm not familiar, I'm sorry.
Well, it's a wheelchair ministry. It's just a few miles from here, where she drove into a lake at age 19 and paralyzed from the neck down, and paints with her mouth and that sort of thing. But as someone who went before you in losing so much of her body use, I was wondering if perhaps you'd learned some lessons from her, but it sounds like perhaps not.
Yes, I have, because there are so many people that have gone before me that have been injured, and I see what they are able to accomplish. I've seen people who are high-level quadriplegics that can still drive cars, drive race cars. So when I see people that are injured more severely than myself, and what they are able to accomplish and do, it's like, well, how can I stop? How can I quit when they are doing so much?
Thank you, Gary, so much for your service. My question to you is, was the incident your first helo crash?
First bad one, yes. I'd been involved in one where we crashed in downtown Baghdad a couple of years prior, more of a hard landing due to some fuel contamination. But my crash was the first and last bad one, I guess.
Thank you.
I think we're going over here.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Really do admire both of you. The helicopter malfunction, was it due to equipment fatigue, or was there some kind of a defect, and has that been resolved?
So they were never quite able to determine exactly why the K-flex coupling failed. What they did suspect was that somewhere in the maintenance process, the drive shaft was not totally aligned, and that over time the vibrations just continued to build up until it reached a critical point and failed. So following that accident throughout our entire fleet, they inspected all the aircraft and inspected all the drive shafts and K-flex couplings, and they determined that it was just an isolated event.
Hi, I have a question about the exoskeleton also. I was curious whether you're able to put it on by yourself or if you need assistance and how hard that process is.
I pretty much need assistance putting this one on. It's not very difficult. It takes us about 5 minutes, but Mary does help me get my legs put in position and get the straps and everything proper like.
We're going to go over here.
Hi, Gary. I just want to thank you and your wife and your whole family for coming. This has been awesome. And for your service, thank you. I wanted to know, how much does this cost? And is it going to be available to regular civilians? Also, do you do any peer counseling with paraplegics?
I do. I'm involved with a SOCOM organization called the Care Coalition. And anytime we have a soldier, active duty or retired, that is injured, any sort of spinal cord injury in my local area, I will go talk to them and hopefully mentor them. As far as costs, the current cost of this exoskeleton is about $110,000, so it's very cost prohibitive. However, as these systems develop, they will become cheaper. There are other manufacturers that have been able to bring down the cost point of their device. So I think in time we will see these continue to drop in price and become more more affordable and more available to everyday consumer.
So we're only going to take 2 more questions, one over here and then one over there. So go ahead, Carla.
Thank you both. I was looking forward to this program very much. I have a question actually for both of you. What role did physical therapy play in your recovery?
So for my particular injury and the level of injury, there wasn't a lot that physical therapy could do to recover any kind of function. So my physical therapy pretty much consisted of learning to transfer, get into the wheelchair. If I'm on the ground, how to get back up into the wheelchair, and just learn things to preserve the functionality in my body that I have. And I was no spring chicken when this happened. So I needed to learn how to preserve the function I have, to maintain it as long as possible as I age.
I remember when Gary was first injured, it was all so foreign. And just getting him in and out of the bed was a production. And you had trying to get in and out of bed, he had this fresh back injury where his spine had just been fused, and he doesn't have, the only strength he has is his arms and shoulders. And what I never ever thought about when I saw somebody in a wheelchair was he doesn't have abdominal muscles. He has very few abdominal muscles. So not only do you not have your legs, then you don't have your abdominal muscles to move around and do those things. And when he first got in, we went in and sat on the mat, the high-low table, and he had to learn how to sit again because we just sit, but he had to learn how to sit again because he didn't have that muscle and that strength. But he, of course, hit it every day hard, and we figured it out.
There was one time in particular, I was passenger in the car, and Speed Racer was driving here. And she took a corner. I wasn't expecting it, and I just I flopped over, and my head's up against it. I'm like, hey, I'm just a torso over here.
The first time we went, we probably got a pass maybe after 2.5, 3 weeks after he was first injured to go somewhere. So we went to the PX, and I was very protective of him, of course, and he wanted to go look at something, magazines or something, I'm not sure. And I was like, well, I can't let it leave him. And I was like, okay, he's not in 2nd grade. So he went, and I was like, yeah, I'll find you. Well, I couldn't find him because he was so short. So I was like looking, trying to look over everything, but he's down here. I couldn't see him over clothes racks or anything else. And so I was calling him on his cell phone, and he didn't answer. I was about ready to have security go help me look for him. And so pretty soon I find him, and I'm like, I've been calling you. And he's like, oh, the phone was on vibrate, and it was under my leg. We've learned a lot.
Lauren, did you have one final question? No? Okay, so we're going to thank you so much for sharing your journey with us here at the library and everyone here in the audience.
Well, thank you for having us.
It's been incredible to meet you. Thank you so much.
What an honor. What an honor. Thank you.
So we do thank you all for coming. Obviously, the exhibition.